The topic today is how to make hiring a virtual sales assistant easy and affordable. Just to give you a little bit of background, where all the tips I'm going to share with you and all the details I'm going to share with you, it's all based on, I guess, kind of my experience, and just to give you a little bit more detail on where that experience came from or what it's based on. The first company I started was Launchpad Solutions, and basically I started this after being a sales guy for a number of years. I got pretty good at prospecting, getting into new accounts, getting meetings, cold calling, and then I started Launchpad as a consulting business where I help small businesses in those areas with their prospecting, getting new leads, getting into new accounts. And I kind of built a book of business, picked up clients, small businesses, mostly in my local community area, the city that I live in. In running that for after about a year of building up that business, I realized that all of my clients, if I had someone that would do the prospecting for them, they would hire that and use that service. So what I did is I started building out a team of virtual salespeople. These were like virtual cold callers. What I did is I posted a job and hired work at home people, and I used kind of a cloud phone system, cloud CRM, and taught them sort of my methodology. And it was like a virtual call center, virtual cold call outsourcing business, and I basically sold that as a service to my clients. It actually ended up becoming something that was easier to sell and something that I could grow bigger than just selling my time as a consultant, and that actually is what became really more of my focus for at that particular time. And we never really grew to be huge. I mean, I think kind of at the peak we were between like 15 to 20 work at home agents and 50 to 20 clients, really like one or two agents per client. But definitely it was a challenging business and learned a lot. But that's really where everything I'm going to show you comes from today, because all of those people that I hired were basically virtual sales assistants, right? Their goal was primarily focused on appointment setting. I mean, the person that you hire, you could have them do different stuff, but the challenges that I experienced, the lessons learned, all apply to what we're here to talk about today. I learned a lot in running that business, and that's actually what led to really the main business that I work on today, which is called Sales Scripter. But in running Launchpad, everybody that I hired, every client that I brought on, we had to build scripts and playbooks, and so I was really going through that process again and again and again that I got kind of good at building scripts and building out a good process for creating scripts, and I ended up turning that into a software application, which is what is Sales Scripter. But also, I got pretty good at training those work-at-home agents. I mean, they needed to learn, they needed to get ramped up, onboarded, and use a certain methodology. So really, that kind of got fine-tuned and developed in the Launchpad business, and that is part of Sales Scripter as well as a kind of a cold calling methodology, a sales prospecting methodology. So that's part of Sales Scripter. But one thing I kind of learned, I started realizing a couple years ago when working with my Sales Scripter clients, is that Sales Scripter was a great tool for them to use to hire and onboard and train virtual assistants or sales assistants. So I started actually in the past 6 months or so, we've started introducing some new functionality in the Sales Scripter side that kind of helps with with having virtual assistants. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a lot of the challenges with hiring virtual salespeople and some tips to resolve those challenges, and then I'll show you a little bit of Sales Scripter along the way as we talk about each tip. There's a little bit of something in Sales Scripter that kind of aligns with each tip, and you can either, if you're interested in using Sales Scripter, that's great, but you can maybe look at Sales Scripter and think of tools that you're already using that you could use in that way, or get some ideas. So that's what we're going to do today, and that's where all of this comes from. I don't think it's crazy or for a salesperson to want a sales assistant. I mean, who doesn't want an assistant, right? Not only is it nice to have someone to do stuff for you that, especially stuff that you don't want to do, whether that might be cold calling, which is not a lot of fun, or maybe just some of the stuff that's more tactical and grinding and time consuming, yeah, it's definitely advantageous or attractive to offload that to an assistant. But the reality is that in most cases it's financially and economically advantageous as well to have a virtual sales assistant. Let me just kind of give you some numbers why. Let's just say that when you hit your sales quota on target earnings, let's say you make $100,000 per year. In most cases, that's probably lower than where you want to be or where you are, and especially if you're a business owner, that's way below where you are. But just for round numbers and for example purposes, let's just say on target you're at 100 grand per year. Well, if you divide, that 100 grand by 52 weeks in a year, let's say you work, not factoring in vacation or whatever, let's just say you work every week and you divide that, then that comes out to basically $2,000 a week, right? And so then if you divide that by 40 hours in a week, you come to $48 per hour. And one way to look at that figure is this is your hourly rate. So let's just assume that you're productive every hour that you work and that you work 40 hours a week. Probably you actually work more than 40 hours a week, but so this could be conservative. But just to kind of get your hands around your value, your worth per hour, let's just say you're worth $50 per hour, and in most cases that's probably low. Well, if that's what you're worth per hour, then if you can hire a virtual sales assistant to, let's say, hire them between $10 to $15 an hour, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more, and they can do work for you, meaning you can then repurpose that time to be more strategic, then in theory that makes sense. If you can, let's just say you're a consultant and you can bill out at $100 per hour and it takes you an hour to mow your yard at your house, and you can pay someone $20 to mow your yard at your home, and you could then use that hour to work with a client, you could see there that it makes more sense for you to hire someone to do that routine activity so you could use your full value. So that's an example of how it can make sense for you to offload. Now it's very important to point out that if you're not running at capacity, meaning if you don't want to hire a virtual sales assistant so you can watch TV or have an easier job, this equation doesn't work. This calculation of return on investment doesn't work when that's the case. It's really when you're running at capacity and there's more work that you can do or more strategic work that you can do, and when you offload the tactical and you stay running at capacity. Let's look at another equation. So again, if 100K per year, let's say that you have a virtual sales assistant, one sales assistant for the whole year, and that at the end of that year you increase from 100K to 150K. That's an improvement of 50K. Let's say that you had that virtual sales assistant working between around 20 hours per week, which is a lot. You don't have to have an assistant for 20 hours per week, but for this equation, let's say that you paid them $250 per week. That would be $12,000 per year. You made 50K. Technically, you made 38 grand on that $12,000 investment, which is a return over 300%. You basically took that. If you multiplied 12 grand by 3, that would be 3,600. So you more than tripled your investment. Now that's if everything works, and we're going to talk about some challenges. It's not that easy, but you can see here that if you can sell more, and the more that and the amount that you sell is more than the cost of your assistant, it definitely makes sense. So that plus the fact that you can get them to do some of the stuff that you don't really want to do, it's a no-brainer, right? Okay, a virtual sales assistant for everybody, right? Well, the problem is that there's a lot of challenges with hiring virtual sales assistants, and I'm telling you firsthand from running my Launchpad business, it was painful at some moments. And so some of the challenges are, finding someone that's going to be good in this role. It's a very, sort of niche role. You need a certain personality. You need someone with, you need someone that's hungry and wants to make money, but you can't have someone who's too hungry because they're not going to make a ton of money, So you need someone who's smart and can learn, but you need someone who isn't too smart, because then they're going to be bored and overqualified. So it can be really challenging to find a good cold caller. And then think about it, you got to teach them what to say. You're going to put them on the phone. They're going to be a representative for you. You have all this knowledge in your head. How how are you going to transfer this knowledge to this virtual assistant? I mean, how are you going to do that? And then they're virtual, right? So how are you going to make sure that they're working? If you're paying them $10 an hour, you want them working for every hour that you pay $10, right? So how are you going to make sure that someone who you can't see is working? Well, and if they work hard, if they work 15 hours a week and they work hard each hour, that's great. But if they're not producing, then that's worth nothing to you, right? So it's also not just about them being active, it's about them producing. And then the worst part is when they leave, right? So you train someone, you spend all this time, they work for you for a little bit, however long. I mean, I had some people work for me for half a day and then quit. Half a day, and half of the half a day, so a quarter of that was spent on me training them, and then they work for a couple hours and then they disappear. That's the worst. And that actually, the disappearing, you could get ghosted. Ghosted is this phrase now that people use with like kind of dating. People just disappear and stop responding to your text messages and calls, and that happens with these people. You can get ghosted because they don't have to come into the office and pick up their things. They could just disappear on you. So, and it's painful. It's painful when you spend all this time ramping them up. And even if they've been working for you for a while, to where you don't have such heartache over spending so much time training them. See, the longer they stay, the less risk you have on the time you've invested. Meaning, if you spend a bunch of hours with them and they only work 1 week, then man, that hurts. If they work for 3 to 6 months, the time you invested isn't so much lost. But it's still painful because then you have to start over. So turnover is a challenge. And then you have to protect your time. Protecting your time is really, really important because, let's face it, if you hire someone, let's just say you hire a virtual assistant to work 10 hours a week. But if you have to spend 10 hours a week or more teaching them, managing them, answering their questions, then you might as well just do it yourself, right? So you have to get to that place where they're producing, they're working a set amount of hours, and only a small percentage of that is how much time you're having to deal with them. Like if they're working 10 hours a week, an ideal amount would be to spend 1 hour with them per week. Then you're getting a really good return if everything else is falling in line. So those are the challenges, right? And that's what stands in your way if you're not already experiencing that. Any one of those could really block you from getting someone to work as an assistant. So what we'll do is we're just going to go through each of those challenges one by one, and we'll go through tips to mitigate those. So in regards to finding a good caller, we're going to talk about job posting and interviewing. Teaching them what to say, we'll talk about a playbook. Making sure they work, I'm going to show you some real tools and technology. Most of them not being Sales Scripter. I will show you a little bit of Sales Scripter, but I'm going to show you a lot of other tools that you can use. I'm going to show you a little bit about how to teach them what to do, a sales methodology. There's definitely things you can do to minimize turnover, and then talk a little bit about onboarding and automation. So going through those one at a time. The first one, let's just talk about where to find a caller. So when I was running that business, believe it or not, I would just post jobs on Craigslist. So I would post a not so sophisticated job posting, work from home. I'd have the compensation, some details of the position, cold calling, whatever. For each job posting I put on Craigslist, I'd probably get like 100 responses from all over. I started using a job board at workathomemoms.com. It's a website, workathomemoms.com. Actually, it's WHAM. It's not, so it's WHM.com. But if you go to this URL, there's a forum, and you can actually post jobs for free in their forum. So there's actually a room in their forum for job postings, and a category for telecommuting, work at home telecommuting jobs. And I got some really great people from that job board as well. I mean, that actually, when I found that, I really kind of started shifting to I just found work at home moms to be a great group of people because they don't have the aspiration and the need to work full time, because there a lot of them are work at home moms. They've just had a child or whatever. They just want to be active and make a little bit of money, and and not just watch TV all day. Although a lot of people that ended up coming through that website weren't either even moms, and weren't even, some of them were males. If that shows you it was a mix, but it's one resource for you. And then you can also look at Odesk, or actually this is an old slide. It's Odesk has been rebranded as Upwork. So that's one site there. It's a job posting. It's not a job posting. It's a site to post, to find people. It's kind of like the Match.com of finding skilled people in different areas. So you can find cold callers on there. You can find web developers, web designers, graphic designers, copywriters, all different things on Upwork.com. But you can certainly find people on there. And the nice thing about that site is you can find people from all over the world, and you can pay them through that site. So you give Upwork your credit card credentials, and then you just get billed weekly for the time that they work, and you can see when they're working and whatnot. One thing that often comes up is that since you're hiring virtual people, they can be anywhere, and you could hire offshore or domestic, meaning I'm based in the U.S., so domestic for me is U.S. Although wherever you're watching this, you could consider this, your domestic being in your local country. But and typically offshore probably refers more towards Asia, because that's where things get a little bit more economical. Although South America, you could consider offshoring and use more economical resources. But I actually only really tested that a little bit. For the most part, with my business, I hired mostly domestic U.S., and I typically paid them between $10 to $15 per hour. In the Philippines, if you're looking for like American or English speaking, the Philippines is great. I think they speak sometimes better English than Americans, so they sound really good, very economical, pay between $2 to $5 an hour, so something to consider. I found turnover to be maybe a little bit higher with using offshore than domestic, but that's always a factor. But some things to think about there. So those are some places to find people, but selecting someone is very critical, right? So I mentioned to you that I would post a job on Craigslist, and I would get around 100 resumes. And the thing is that, okay, well, first of all, 100, and again, it's not 100 resumes, it's 100 responses, because some of them don't include resumes, which is a good example of why these aren't 100 real qualified applicants. You get a lot of not so desirable applicants in the people that you get exposed to, wherever you're, either looking for people or you have them coming to you. So it can be time consuming to filter down to the right person. So I found that to be a big challenge when I started my business. And that, so let's just say I post one job posting and I have 100 responses. It's going to take a lot of time. And at this time I was a business owner, so I was also doing every sales, customer, client engagements and whatnot. So I didn't have a ton of time to go through and do all this interviewing. Which if you're looking for a virtual sales assistant, you don't have a lot of time either. Like I said, you don't want to spend all this time getting this person interviewed, recruited, and set up. So regardless of your role, you don't have a ton of time to do interviewing as well. So what I found was I'd have 100 resumes, and I would kind of go through like 10, and I would find like a few that looked good, and then I would call a few people. I wouldn't get a hold of some people, and I'd end up on the phone with one person, and I would hire them pretty quickly because they sounded okay, and I was tired of looking at resumes and tired of trying to call people. And so I would hire someone real quickly, and if you hear the numbers that I put there, 100 responses, I'd look at it about 10, I would call about 5, and I would end up on the phone with 2 or 3, right? Those are not really good filtering numbers, meaning I did not get exposed to a lot of the people that were in there, so I didn't really do a good job of filtering out the ones that didn't fit. what that leads to is that leads to you hiring not the optimum person, and that leads to turnover, someone not doing a good job, someone quitting, and you wasting all that time. You wasted all that time interviewing, you wasted all that time hiring and training. So one thing that really transformed my business and my ability to hire good people is this process right here. I shouldn't have thrown this up because you might have been reading this when I was explaining that. But this is a process. So you have 7 steps here. So step 1, and this may seem like cumbersome or whatever, you don't really care, but this is really a key to you doing this successfully. So step 1 is to set up a voicemail box that's dedicated for you to get recordings from your applicants. Now, you're going to end up, if you're hiring a salesperson, you're going to need to set up a voicemail box for them anyways and a phone line. So you might as well just set this up for them and use it for interviewing. And when you've hired that position, then you could use that voicemail box and that phone line for them. So that's, if you're thinking, how am I going to have a voicemail box to use for interviewing? That's how you do it. Set up the line, the voicemail box, use it for interviewing. You hire the person, that's their phone line. So so you post a job posting, and then you're going to receive, let's say you receive those 100 responses. To every response you get, you send an automated email saying, "Thank you for replying," and you send them the phone number, and you say, "Call this number and answer these 2 or 3 questions." And what's going to happen here, you don't even look at the resumes that you send this to. It's just you have a template. Every response you get, you send this response, and you see what comes back. And it's interesting, only a percentage of the people that you send this to will follow your instruction. So what you're doing right there is you're filtering out the people that either aren't interested or can't follow a basic instruction. Then you're going to get only a certain number of people that actually call, because you'll get some hang-ups, whether or not you know which people hang up or not, depending on the phone system you use. The phone system I used, I knew how many hang-ups I got, but only about half of the people leave a message and half of the people hang up. So you're filtering right there as well. You're filtering out the people that might be shy or can't, be outgoing or responsive. And then you're going to get the recordings. Now, the great thing about this is that you're hiring a virtual sales assistant, so their voice, how they sound, is so critical, and you're going to hear that right away without calling anybody. So the numbers are basically, if you get 100 responses, and then you send out the template to 100 people, only 50 people are going to call your phone system, and then only 20 will leave a message, and then of the 20, then only 10 are going to sound acceptable, and then you call, and then you schedule interviews with those 10 people. So what you're getting to there basically is you're getting to the cream of the crop without reading resumes and making calls to people and chasing them. And so it will reduce your time that you spend, and it will tremendously improve your ability to get to hire a good virtual assistant. So I know that might sound like a lot of goobly gop in terms of process. It was a game changer for me in terms of my business. I ended up with people, the types of virtual assistants that were with me for years. You go from having people work for you for a day to hiring people that, like, I have a virtual assistant today that's been with me for like 3 years. And I rarely talk to her, and she just does her thing. So this is the process that gets you to those people, because they're out there. But there's a lot of garbage that you have to go through along the way. Now, step 6 is really something I kind of learned along the way, which was step 6 is ask interview questions. Well, first of all, I think a key to a salesperson being effective is asking good sales questions. The key to a person hiring top caliber people or selecting the right person out of a group of people when you're hiring is asking good interview questions. It's not rocket science, but some people just sort of, hey, tell me about yourself. Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years? There are good interview questions to ask. And what I learned was I would hire people and they would quit or they wouldn't work out, and I would reflect on that there was a characteristic about them that they either had or didn't have that I didn't know about. And I started to realize if I would have only known that, I wouldn't have hired that person. Let's just be totally obvious. Let's just say that a person has a characteristic of that they don't like calling people, cold calling and calling people they don't know. Let's say that they have a charming personality, but you don't know that, hey, how do you feel about calling a total stranger over the phone? Does that make you nervous? Or, are you like terrified? Or is it something that you can deal with? So that's a characteristic. And there's a lot of different characteristics you might look for, like able to work independently, needs to work a certain amount of hours a week, but not too many hours a week or whatever. So basically, I started to think about what are the key characteristics that would make someone a good virtual assistant, or for me at the time, I was a virtual cold caller. And then what I did was I developed a set of questions that probed for each characteristic I was looking for. So instead of saying, "Hey, what's your biggest weakness?" which is just a question that they're going to lie to or not answer honestly or whatever, I would, "Hey, tell me about a time where you displayed integrity." Because maybe integrity is a good question for me. So, anyways, that's just an advice on getting to the right people. Number 6, asking interview questions that align with your target characteristics. And then what I would do is I would create a spreadsheet with all the people that I interviewed, and I would put points for them in these different categories. Like they would get points for how they sounded. They would get points out 1 through 10, right? They would get points for how well of a home office environment they seemed to describe to me. That's an example of a characteristic. Are they working on a kitchen table, or do they have a home office? So those were the types of things I realized that I wanted to start to look for. So I used a point system to help me determine, after I talked to 10 people, which person I would hire from a mathematical standpoint. So this is all critical for you to protect yourself from wasting time. Again, if you have to spend 10 hours a week and they quit, then you're going backwards. I told you that in Sales Scripter we've been developing some features to help with this. So this is pretty brand new. This is an area in Sales Scripter called staffing, and we're not really actively marketing it yet, but it's functional. There's an interview builder. So this is a feature that takes you through the process of building out your questions. It's basically a library of questions. So if I just show you this real quick, the system is loaded up with questions, and it's also loaded up with characteristics to look for. Because when I just showed you a couple characteristics, I said has an office environment, has integrity. Maybe those were things you hadn't thought of. You're like, yeah, those are good things to ask about. Well, this system actually is preloaded with characteristics to think about in terms of personality, skills, financial, education, and whatnot. And when you can grab your ideal list of characteristics, and then for each characteristic that you select, we give you different questions that you can choose, and you just drag and drop and build your list of questions. Now, and you can add, if there's not a question there that you think needs to be, that you want to ask, you can add your own questions. Now, you may say, well, that's nice, but that's not really going to transform what I do. The nice thing about using our question builder, or at least getting your questions in there, is that we have a form that you can use that displays your questions that you can have up when you interview somebody. And I told you that I had a spreadsheet where I would give points for someone in different categories. Well, you can score the person's answers as you're on the phone with them, and you can make notes as well, and you log those, and then you end up, we have a tool called the applicant ranker, which this basically is a very sophisticated version of the spreadsheet that I had. So let's say that these are the applicants that you're interviewing and you're pursuing. You can see there the points in the different categories for the different questions that you asked, and you can see who has the most. But so you could use this to say, okay, well, the person that has the most points is the one I'm going to hire. But you might notice that maybe someone has you might determine what is most important to you. So you can see here that this person has the highest experience, but they are very low in certain categories. So you can do some analysis here. This is designed to help you to pick the right person. Just something to keep in mind there. And moving on to the next challenge and tip is you have all this knowledge in your head. How in God's name are you going to transfer all this knowledge that you've accrued in 10 to 20 years to someone who knows nothing, and how are you going to do this? Well, the way you do this is the way that I did this with my work-at-home agents, and that is that I gave them a playbook. Now, one thing I want to point out is, you may have them do cold calling, appointment setting, following up on leads, whatever, but let me show you a sales process that we kind of use for a typical sales, really regardless of what you sell. We think there's an initial contact, and that's where you reach out to someone. You might pre-qualify them, but this could be a cold call, an email, you meet someone at an event. It's a brief conversation, 2 to 5 minutes, and that typically leads to an appointment. So this would be a longer conversation, face-to-face meeting for coffee, over the phone, longer phone conversation, and that's where you might have a more detailed conversation. And then a third step might be a presentation. This is where you do a demo, deliver a proposal, go through pricing, whatnot. So those are 3 steps that I think most B2B, especially B2B people go through. And you could combine those. The first top 2 might combine, or the bottom 2 might combine, or you could do them all at one time. But those are 3 steps that I think you go through. And the reason why I show you this is because step 1 you can do with not a ton of knowledge transfer. And I learned this with my work-at-home agents, which is this is all they did. They never went beyond the first step. So they were primarily focused on setting appointments for our clients, really. Now, you may get to a point where you have a virtual sales assistant that also handles appointments for you. I mean, who knows? It could grow into something, bigger. But the learning curve between step 1 and step 2 is very big, meaning I could spend a little bit of time with someone and they can do step 1 competently, and I'll show you how. But to do step 2, where you're really going into detail, you can answer a lot of questions that might come up. Someone needs hours and hours of training, and you don't want to give that to a virtual sales assistant. So we always drew the line between step 1 and step 2. That's where you may want to do it. Like I said, maybe if you have that virtual sales assistant that's been with you for 6 months to a year, maybe you start getting them doing appointments. Who knows? But the key takeaway here is have them focus on step 1 either initially, and you can get someone competently doing step 1 with not a ton of knowledge transfer, at least using our methodology and our playbook. And so what I would do with my work-at-home agents is I would give them basically documents that would kind of tell them what to say, to be honest with you, in all different situations. So I would give them a call script. Their call script, and it would usually be around asking good questions. So one thing I kind of figured out with training these people was think about the product that you sell, okay? And think about teaching someone how to answer questions about your product, the pricing, how it works, how it's sold. It could take a lot of time to teach someone how to answer questions. But now think about how much time it takes to get someone to learn how to ask a set of questions. You can teach someone really quickly, these are the questions you need to ask, and a long time to answer questions. So the key there is if you're wanting to train someone really quickly, teach them what questions to ask. And what's really interesting is you're kind of hacking the system here, because you could have a virtual sales assistant that knows very little, and they're working for you on the first day that they work for you. And because you taught them what questions to ask, they're actually going to sound pretty good. They're going to sound maybe more sophisticated than the product selling pusher experienced salesperson out there that calls up someone and says, hey, I sell this, do you guys need this? Your virtual assistant, might call up and say, hey, I'm checking to see how important is it for you guys to improve your website ranking on search engines. So they might not even know what that question means, but they know that that's the question you want them to ask. Now, but you might be thinking, well, Okay, well, what do they do with the response? If they don't know what the question means, how are they going to follow up the answer? And the important thing here is actually, let me go back to the sales process. If your virtual assistant is doing prospecting, their goal is to schedule and get the prospect to step 2. So most times, regardless of what the prospect says, meaning if the prospect answers their question with a question like, well, I'm not sure, do you guys do this, which your virtual sales assistant has no idea what they're talking about, they can usually use that as an opportunity to go for their goal. So they get a question, or the conversation goes in a direction that they have no idea what's going on. They can always go, you know what, I'll be honest with you, I'm just the person that really is assigned with reaching out and starting the conversation with you. I'd like to connect you with the person that can answer that and go in more detail with you. Can I put a meeting on your calendar for Thursday morning, or does Friday afternoon work? So they get into an uh-oh moment, and then they're able to position, and actually that uh-oh moments lead to them getting their ultimate goal, which is setting an appointment or moving the prospect through the sales process. So they can get there pretty quickly. Just give them a list of questions to ask. The questions are usually central to their call script. Another thing that I would give my work at home agents is objection handling responses. You know, objections are going to come up for them, for you, for everybody, right? So it's interesting. When I was a salesperson, most of the sales jobs I worked in, and I worked for very sophisticated companies, they never taught me how to respond to objections. So I don't know. I kind of figured it out on my own, and But anyways, I gave my work at home agents. These are the objections you're going to come across. How do it takes too long to implement, you guys. We're not interested. We don't have any budget. We can't make any changes. When these come up, say this, and just have it on a piece of paper. For your people. I'd give them call scripts. I'd give them email templates. That being said, if you don't know by now, Sales Scripter does all of that. And before Sales Scripter existed, I basically would create all of that in Word documents and email those all to my work at home people. You can certainly do that. But if you like what I've discussed so far, so Sales Scripter will build all that out for you and allow you to either distribute it, you could download it and send it to your people, or your work at home agent can actually look at it through Sales Scripter. So this is like a document view of a call script, and as you can see, like central to it are here are your questions that you can have your virtual assistant asking. This is a sort of an interactive view, get to the key questions here. So this view kind of just isolates the key thing that they want to talk about at whatever particular time. You have your objection handling responses over here. Just send me some information. Here's the response you can have for them. And so this can be a tool that you can use to give your virtual assistant what to say. So this, in my opinion, is a game changer with hiring a virtual assistant. Without this, or without using a playbook, you're going to just like spend hours teaching them, all this stuff about your product. That's actually your natural instinct, is let me explain to you all the product. I mean, with my virtual assistants that worked at home, they knew very little about the client's products that they were working for. They just knew what questions to ask and what objection responses. So Sales Scripter also has your voicemail scripts as well for your virtual assistant. Another big thing is email templates. So here you go. If your virtual assistant is going to be doing prospecting, they're going to be sending emails. So here you go. Here are all the emails that they need to be sending when they're reaching out to people. They can send these directly through Sales Scripter as well. If you create an account for them, and here load up their email information, and they can send the emails through here. They can see who's been clicking and opening emails and whatnot. Next challenge is making sure that they work. So this is really important. Like I said, if you're paying them $10 an hour, you want them working every hour you're paying them. So one thing is, and the nice thing about this is, let's say you're hiring a virtual assistant to do accounting work for you. You don't really know when they're doing the accounting or when they're in the accounting application or whatnot. With sales activities, typically based on the phone calls they make. You can look at a phone basically, if you have them on a phone system, all the calls they make are going to be logged, and that gives you a very good picture of how busy they are, how many calls they're making. So I've used a number of cloud phone systems. The best one that I've used, and I've been using Ring Central for, I don't know, maybe 5 years now. It's the best one I've used in terms of quality. It's a voice over IP phone system. They give you their own soft phone. So that image on the right is a soft phone. The soft phone is a piece of software that actually downloads to your PC, which is really nice because if you're hiring a virtual assistant, you don't have to worry about buying them a phone, sending them a phone, them using their own personal cell phone. You can set up an account with Ring Central or another cloud phone provider, and it's different pricing out there. I think I pay $30 a month a phone line, but there's different options out there. And then you have them, it's like they're on your corporate phone system. Whether or not you use Ring Central for yourself, you could set a phone line up for them. And you can also use the Ring Central phone line for your interviewing as well. So let me just show you. So like the nice thing about using Sales Scripter as well is that we can just real easily use click to dial. So you have this phone number here. If you click on any phone number, it automatically dials them. So that's one way to, so it can make it real easy for you to call people real quickly. And that's another thing with your sales virtual assistant is you want them to be efficient, right? So you don't want them punching into a cell phone, a phone number every time they call someone. You want them to just do a click and call someone. So you want them to be able to work quickly. But the key thing there is I can log into Ring Central and print a call log every week and see how busy someone is. There's also call recording options, so that can be real big. I mean, you can listen to their calls and hear how they sound and do coaching. So the other thing is you definitely want to use some sort of CRM for this resource. I mean, some people hire someone, they give them a spreadsheet of people to call, but it takes a lot of calls and attempts to get a hold of people, and it's really difficult to log and track who to call and who you've already called and who you need to call again in a spreadsheet. So there's free CRMs out there. There's Zoho and Sightly. Both have a free version. Salesforce is very well known. Google Docs. I often used the CRM in addition to Google Docs because I found that like creating lists in one system I used a lot was Insightly. I really liked Insightly, but it was really difficult to say, okay, to a caller, here's your campaign list of people to call. I found all these systems very difficult to create a list. So I'd give them a list of people to call in Google Docs, and then they would have their CRM with the same people loaded up so they could then make notes and whatnot. And then also, of course, Sales Scripter has a CRM as well. And so the CRM in Sales Scripter, you could certainly load up all of your accounts and contacts. Because I've built CRM to include all the things that I never had with all the other systems I used, I was real quick to create lists functionality, so you can create whatever lists you have here. So this really eliminated that Google Docs need that I had. So like for me, actually, like here's an attended webinars list. So here are all the people that have attended my webinars. Now this could easily be a list of here are cold list of prospects that don't know who we are, and your work at home person can be assigned to a particular list, and this is the list that they work down to call. The other thing is that one thing we're talking about here with the challenge of is making sure they work. And so Sales Scripter does something like no other system out there for managing productivity, which is, so let me click on this contact. We have a feature called login interaction. It's similar to like log a call on most systems out there. And so login interaction on a lot of CRMs, you'll see log a call. And we took it one step further because not only do you want to log a call, but there's all sorts of different stuff you can log in the system. Maybe you email somebody, maybe you meet with someone. Well, you want to log a meeting. So you have here your different types of activities. So okay, you call someone. So there's logging the call. But what we have here are all the other things that can happen in that interaction. And so let's say we call someone, they answered the phone, and then we spoke to them, they need what we have, they asked about pricing, and they asked for a demo. We also can log objections that come up. So they said they already used someone, they can't make any changes. So what I want to point out is we're about to log this without having to type out anything, although we could certainly make notes if there's something not here. So we're going to log a very detailed note without typing a word. The other thing is that we're going to log quality points and pursuit points. So the quality points are how good or bad of a prospect they are, because see, some of these are negative quality points. The objections are negative quality points for sure. And then we're also going to log pursuit points, which is really key to what we're talking about here, which is knowing who's working and who's not. So you can see here that pursuit points, for the different things that are found out or done or that take place, a different number of pursuit points will happen. And we can also schedule, okay, I'm going to follow up with this person in 2 weeks. I'm going to hit save. So all that will have been done pretty quickly. And what happens is then all of those details get logged on the chart for one thing, so you can see what's going on. This isn't a very pretty chart for because there was no activity here, but normally the charts are more there's more going on, but you can see what's going on a chart. Here's our next task that we've scheduled for ourselves real quickly. Here's the interaction that we logged with all of those notes. We didn't type a word, and we logged all of that stuff. But the more important thing is that you can go to reporting, and you can go to this, we call that feature prospect points. So you remember I've talked about tracking points for different things. That's something I'm real big on. And so the prospect points is sort of like a game. And you can see here, this is just sort of a demo account, but you can see here these are the total quality points, pursuit points. But if this was your team, you can see, or your virtual assistant, you could see how much pursuit points do they have. And you can see on a chart, so you can see when they're working and when they're not. So this, basically, if they log every interaction they do, you're going to see a really good picture of how many calls they made, how many emails they sent, how many times certain objections came up, and you can even report on that data by everything that you logged here. So you could say how many calls were made for the last month, and pull up a report for whatever person on your team you want to pull up. So just something to keep in mind there. Again, we're talking about how to know that a virtual person's working from home, and there's a lot of tools out there to help you with that. The last tool is Time Doctor. This is a timekeeping tool, so you could use this for compensation as well. So Time Doctor allows punch in and punch out functionality, and what it also does is it also does a screen capture. So when they're logged into Time Doctor, it's going to capture their screen every, I don't know, so many seconds or whatever. So you can log into Time Doctor and see what they're working on, see what there'll be like warnings of inactivity. When they're not active, Time Doctor warns them if they should punch out or not. So I've used Time Doctor for years. It's a great tool for managing work at home people. Next tip is a sales methodology. So if they're calling people, you need them to kind of know what to do. We talked about knowing what to say, but there's sort of let me just say this. When I hired work at home people, I definitely taught them a methodology. I would teach them what to say and ask, which we've already talked about a little bit. I would teach them about asking good questions. Again, we talked about that with being part of the playbook. I would not only give them objection handling responses, I would teach them the logic of objections. Why are people giving them, which objections to anticipate, how to get around them, why to respond in a certain way. They're going to run into gatekeepers a lot. I would teach them how to minimize the challenge of gatekeepers, how to really focus on setting appointments, and so on. So I would teach them a full methodology. Now, if you don't have any, you could either teach them your methodology, how you like to sell. That could take some time for you to transfer that knowledge. The good thing for you is we've done a pretty good job, if I do say so myself, I am biased, but we've done a pretty good job of basically recording and structuring Well, we've done a good job of building a sales prospecting methodology, and it's all recorded and on YouTube for free. If I go back to Sales Scripter, there's a tab here for training resources, and our methodology is on 2 pages in here. So you have prospecting basics. So if your virtual assistant was working in Sales Scripter, you could have them come here, and you see here there's a whole playlist of videos, or you could send them to YouTube. So these are all on YouTube for free. In fact, I know that I know of actual companies out there that are using our training. They're not even a customer of ours. They're just using our training for their salespeople. So the nice thing here is you could hire a virtual sales assistant, and you could say, go here. There's 9 videos, and this is what I would recommend how you roll it out actually. So basics is 9 videos. I would have them watch 1 video a day for 2 weeks. It's 9 business days, right? So 1 video a day, that allows them to kind of absorb and start to work and have them work while they're doing that. So, but that's the rollout. And then there is advanced techniques, which is more videos. There's like 12, but I would have them start on those in month 2 or 3 and have them watch, and these are on YouTube as well, have them watch one video a week. So the brain is a sponge. You don't want to shoot them with a fire hose so they forget everything, and that's a rollout that I think positions you for success. Just to let you know where we're going with this page here, and within a year we want to have this as more of a learning management system, so you can assign these videos to your virtual assistant, and you can see that they've completed it, and they will have had to answer some questions to pass it. So something to keep in mind there with getting them ramped up with the methodology. Minimizing turnover, I mean, there's things you can do. Your goal should be to hire someone that's going to stay with you as long as possible, knowing that no one stays forever, but you don't want them to work a week. I mean, if you can get a few months out of them, that's good. If you get them to 6 months, that's great. A year is awesome. So I always try to pay people well. I would start them around $13 an hour, and I would give them 8 raises based on them learning and performing and being dedicated pretty quickly. Bonuses are good. Identify what kind of tasks you're assigning them. Like if you're having them schedule appointments, I would give $20 to $50 per appointment is what I would give. And the reason why that there's a range there is it depends on how the type of business you're in, the type of prospects you're dealing with. For example, if you're selling to executives at big companies, your sales assistant will schedule less meetings but do a good job, but the meeting volume is going to be less. So I would pay more for those types of meetings, $50. There are some lists of prospects, let's say mom and pop organizations, where it's easier to get in, and so the same type of work can lead to a higher volume of appointments. So those, even knowing there's less work required in each appointment, so I would pay less. So I pay like $20 per appointment. That kind of you'll kind of have to figure that out based on the type of territory that you're working. 1099 versus W2. Most of my workers were 1099. So there's I don't know if you know much about the 1099 is an independent contractor. W2 is employee, where you pay some taxes and you have to deduct taxes for them and typically use some sort of payroll processing. 1099, you can just send them a check from your bank or PayPal or whatever. 1099, you can look it up. There is a description for what requires someone to be a 1099. A virtual sales assistant is pretty close to being considered a 1099. Works on their own equipment. So far everything I showed you does that. They'll be on their own computer and internet service and whatnot. Works on their own schedule. So that's something you want to be careful of. You don't want them to have a fixed schedule, like you're their manager and they're checking in, and you want them to be a little bit independent in order to qualify for 1099, and not too much management and direction. So something you also want to be careful of. One way to look at it is think about someone that you hire to build a website for you. You're not going to say, okay, I want you to be here at 8 a.m. every day to build my website. And you're not going to say, okay, this is what I want my website to look like, but I'm not going to tell you, that's their own business, building websites. So they can be a 1099 person for you. But if you're really giving them instruction on, and I know that what I've shown you here is a little close to you being their manager and giving them instructions. So you kind of want to be careful of that if you're going to do 1099. Although it's a little bit, some of it's in a gray area, but if you let them work their own schedule, you give them the training, but you kind of let, and you give them the direction of, this is the list, this is what I want you to do, and go do your thing, I'm going to pay you every week and check in with you, then you can probably get away with 1099. And part-time versus full-time, I guess you would probably only want part-time. I liked having someone between 10 to 20 hours a week, especially if they're doing a lot of outbound cold calling. I wouldn't want someone working for me doing 40 hours of cold calling per week, just because that's kind of burnouts, tough job, tough work. Just a few tips to again, we're talking about decreasing turnover. So just understanding, cold calling is difficult. So, don't be too hard on them. Be understanding of them. Focus on inputs instead of outputs. So instead of being like, where are the leads, where are the leads, where are the meetings, focus more on how many calls are you making, how are you dealing with objections, are you following our process. Use carrot more than a stick. I'm real big on just kind of empower them. This is what I need you to do, and don't really lurk over their shoulder, figuratively speaking. Just kind of set them on a course for the week, let them do their thing, maybe then regroup at the beginning of the next week to kind of check in instead of looking over them every day. I would give reporting to my people every Monday, so they would see. So we would track, different metrics: how many hours they worked, how many calls they made, how many leads they produced, so that they could see where they stood. I would provide coaching and try to do it on a weekly basis. Focus on what objections are coming up, what challenges are working on. That's another thing. If I go back to Sales Scripter, one thing that's unique in Sales Scripter, I showed you the log and interaction feature where you can get your assistant to log the interactions that are coming up. So if I go back to reporting, that is really awesome data, and you can actually view that data because we aggregate it, and you can then see what objections are coming up. And if you have multiple people working for you, you can see for the different people that are working for you, each person's going to have different objections, or they could be different. So you can actually provide coaching for the team to say, okay, guys, this is the, and you can see I mean, instead of meeting, this is what a lot of sales managers do is on Monday morning they say, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Or what's standing in your way? Well, you can look at this and see what's standing in their way. This is the most common objection. They said they're not interested. This is, by the way, this is sample data, so don't think that that's the most common objection for Sales Scripter. But this is sample data. But this shows you what you need to focus on. So you can look at what's the most common. Let's role play that. Let's see if that's in the playbook. This is the response that's in the playbook. Is that working? Have you guys tried that? Okay, how can we change that? So when it comes to your weekly sales coaching, this one feature here will take you from it would take you from being a bad sales manager to being an awesome sales coach. This one piece of data right here. Protecting your time. You don't want to spend 100 hours getting this person set up, right? So you want to use automation as much as possible. So when I was running that business, I was doing training. I would hire someone, I would train them on a topic, and I realized, okay, I need to record what I just trained that person so that the next time I hire someone, they watch the recording. So automate as much as possible. Use videos. I already talked about how you can automate the interview process. Make callers go through hoops. So instead of just saying, I want to hire this person, I'm going to spend 20 hours with them, protect your time and only spend time with them once they've gone through a hoop. Let me give you an example. So I told you about the interview process. So you post a job. You get 100 responses to your job. They went through a hoop. So you then send an email to the people that responded, because they went through a hoop, and now you're having them call a phone system. Well, the people that left a message you then engage with, and that was a hoop. So you can do that continuously, even once they're hired. You've hired them, have them watch a set of videos, then have them do an activity, and it's not until they complete that activity that you invest more time in them. Spoon feed information. I explained to you about how to use the videos in a spread out way. So spoon feed information. You want to have some sort of contract or agreement in place, so that's something that's important. I'm not a lawyer and don't pretend to be, but so I just want to put that up there. So those are the tips. I'm actually going back to, really quickly before we end, I want to go back to the very first tip, which is finding a good caller, which is one of the key challenges. And I want to show you something new in SalesScripter. So in SalesScripter, if I go back to that new area that's called staffing, there is a page called labor pool. Now, one thing I've figured out really quickly, this was when I had my cold calling business, was I could take one caller from one project to another client project extremely easy if they knew the methodology. Meaning, if they knew how to cold call, if they knew the sales process that we were using, if they knew how to deal with objections, if they knew how to deal with gatekeepers, I could simply change their questions to the different clients' questions, change their objection responses to the different objection responses, and they could hit the ground running with very little transition time. So what is that? I started to realize that if someone is in the SalesScripter ecosystem as a virtual assistant and they finish a project, they could be very attractive to someone that needs a virtual sales assistant. And that's the goal for this area here called labor pool. These are real people. Now, I want to admit this is brand new, and I'll tell you where I want it to be, and it's not there yet, but currently these are real people that have applied to work at home sales jobs. So these are people that are looking to be virtual sales assistants. Now, these people are not familiar, not that I know of at least, not familiar yet with the SalesScripter methodology. But where I want this to be 6, 12 months down the road is that you'll have a set of people here that are familiar with all those things I described, the methodology, the objections, gatekeepers, blah, 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 so that you could come here and you could see how many projects they've done and whatnot. You can click on these people and get their resume. Maybe we'll add a feature for reviews and whatnot. But I want this to be a place where you can come and select people and onboard them really quickly through it. Basically, I kind of vision this being kind of like an Uber for sales, where you can come. Uber didn't change hiring a driver, it made it easy. You could push a button and a driver comes around the corner. So I want this to be hiring a virtual assistant easy. Push a button. The other thing is that this area also makes contacting these people real easily. So we've brought over some of the core SalesScripter functionality. So like there's email templates for setting interviews and meetings. So schedule a phone interview so you can reach out to people real quickly without having to type emails. But anyways, that is it. That is all I want to show you from a tips, mitigating tips, and also give you some examples using SalesScripter. We are fairly over time, so I'm going to go through our sort of informational commercial and slides pretty quickly. But if you want more information about us, all of this is part of what we call the Smart Sales System. So it's a system designed to help you with sales messaging and response tactics. There's 3 pieces: a methodology, software platform, which I've shown you here today, and professional services.